Well, we only have a United States senator just holding up the show. Oh, you know what? I'm in a really good mood tonight.
Good.
We have U.S. Senator Chris Coons on, so we will take some calls from him later on. How you doing, Senator?
Doing great. Great to be on again.
Thank you for coming on. Before we go to the Senator, I have a few announcements. The Delaware African American Sports Hall of Fame, which I'm a member of, Stormers Classic, we got inducted. Their annual Hall of Fame, it will be April the 20th, down in Dover at the Modern Maturity Center. This will be from 6 p.m. until, it's really a really good event. The people who are getting inducted this year will be from Newcastle: Richard Dickey Simmons, basketball; Robert Jock Taylor, martial arts; Michael Thomas, basketball. I think he played for Salesianum. Bob Vanderhost played at Delaware State. I think Bob Vanderhost was 40 years old when he was playing at Delaware State. I'm joking, man. In Kent County, you have Richard Morris, basketball; Shirley Rowley. I think Cora Robinson, I think she coached at Delaware State also. George Tagle. And in Sussex, you have Ralph Bird, Anthony Brinkley, Donald Lee Johnson, and Charles Shelton. We need your support, business, churches, individuals. To obtain tickets, they're only $35. You could call William E. Taylor in Newcastle. His number is 302-762-9332. Harvey Riley's in Kent County, but I think if you call Mr. Taylor, you'll get it. And also, I think the Howard High School, it's not on this list that they gave me, but I think the Howard High School class of 72 that went undefeated, I think they're being inducted also, but no, they're not on here. But I think they're being inducted. Also, I'm dedicating this show tonight to a good friend of mine, Craig D. Shields. I remember Craig and I went to school together. I always like seeing people who, we were in Libby's. He said he always watched the show, so Craig, if I mess up, this show's dedicated to you. So we're taking out on Craig, not me. I call him Big Guard. Also, happy birthday, belated birthday to Duffy Samuels. Heard Duffy had an incredible birthday party at the Clarion. Duffy, I'm sorry I missed it. Wasn't feeling too well, but I hear you got took your shirt off and was getting your groove on. You know, you showed your hard body. I don't know if that body's like it used to be, Duffy, but happy birthday to you, buddy. Also, ladies and gentlemen, you know, this is the show that people get information from, Senator. 3-4 weeks ago, I told them that Herman Holloway Jr. will be the chairman of the Wilmington Housing Authority Board. Guess what? Herman Holloway is the chairman of the Holloway Board. Yeah, like I told him he was going to be a U.S. Senator. But, you know, what I find ironic, and really I'm laughing, Herman Holloway's probably been calling Fred Purnell for 12 years with no return calls. He's probably went to the Housing Authority and got kicked out for 12 years. Now he's the chairman of the board. Woo! See, you know, in Delaware it's strange, you know, because these people stay around forever. And you just never know. And I hear Calvin Brown's the treasurer. Oh, God. And I also told him that it was going to be exits, people were going to leave the board. Herman is not playing. So now when Herman calls the Housing Authority, I'd like to be on the other line, Mr. Purnell. Herman Holloway Jr. is on the phone, the chairman. Hurry, I can't wait to talk to you. I can't find out what's going on. Also, congratulations to Maurice Pritchett. Maurice Pritchett, I see Tom Gordon gave Maurice Pritchett like $21,000 to be the educational liaison. Me personally, and we're going to talk about education, I think he needs more than that. You know what disturbs me? Now, I know the people in our community. I know their mentality. Oh, he got $21,000 to do what? Check out all the money that we've lost from Race to the Top. Look at the consultants on top of the consultants. Oh, you can go. See, you know, people in our community, they don't do research. It's public information. Some of these folks are getting tens of millions of dollars. Most of the people who are getting the millions of dollars, folks, you don't even know. They don't write about them. You've never seen them. From some of these committee of 2015 and all these different guys. I mean, these people get money. People from out of the state, Jersey. Now, Jersey is probably the worst educational institution in the world, and they got people got contracts come over here teaching our teachers millions of dollars, Senator. But that's not you saying that. That's me. I think it's horrible. Now here's a guy who's been in our state for 20-something years, and I broke that story early on. I commend Tom Gordon for doing that, because we need someone who understands our children and dedicated. $21,000? Are you serious? What can he do? I mean, he can't even, after he paid gas for a while, and there's a lot of other people they need to put on the payroll. Well, I got a lot to talk about, man. I got to get to you, but I can't even talk about all this stuff. Mike Brown is beating up the mayor for his deployment plan. I need to get Mike Brown and the mayor on here. This stuff is getting crazy. But also, I want to commend Dennis Williams and also Tom Gordon for sending that joint letter. I mean, we got to do something about this education, man, seriously. Also, don't forget this Wednesday, I think it's this Wednesday, it's going to be Delaware State. Or is it? Yeah, it's Wednesday, I think. If somebody else knows, let me know. It's Tuesday or Wednesday. Delaware State, we're having the event at the Sheraton from 6 to 7:30. It's like a tour where the president comes down, Harry Williams, who's doing an excellent job, and he's just get everybody all fired up. So, wow, I think that's all I got. Oh, also, don't forget John Sheehy. John Sheehy, congratulations on your, John Sheehy. You know John Sheehy? Retiring. John Sheehy's retiring, if you can believe that. He looks too young to retire, but he's been there for like 40 years. I did stop by the bowling alley and say hi to John. They kicked me out because I had on a sweatsuit. They said I had to. They said I wasn't dressed appropriate, so I made sure I put on this shirt and tie. But John Sheehy's, and John is having something this Saturday at the Clarion. John, congratulations. Keep up the good work. How you doing, Senator?
Doing great. Doing great.
Tell me, what's going on here?
Well, while we're at it, we ought to congratulate the St. Elizabeth's girls and the Howard boys for winning the state championships. We just had big Final Four nationally, but it's important to recognize the folks locally
the boys
who've had
were,
great teams.
The boys were on the show a couple weeks ago.
Oh, no, I missed that.
Yeah, see?
If I watched,
that's why I tell you, you got to stay on Crossfire, man. Actually, you could go to YouTube and go to
watch the
Community Crossfire, even this show, Community Crossfire, Norman Oliver, Channel 28.
Terrific.
And it'll be right up there. So I might be on the U.S. Senate floor and all that kind of stuff.
And Elena Deladon and the Lady Blue Hens had a great run. So
they had a great run. She played in my league when she was younger.
Really?
Her brother Eugene was also a good player. But it's funny. I think one thing I was a little disturbed about, I think one of the sports writers said, this shows what Delaware players could do, stay home. You should some of our local talent should go to the University of Delaware. I thought that they should say Delaware State. I mean, Delaware State's Division I. It's not like we're not Division I.
And to your point earlier, President Williams is doing a great job.
Yeah.
Delaware State, one of the things I think isn't broadly appreciated is that Delaware State, just in the last 2 years, has gotten big federal grants.
Absolutely.
NSF, NIH, NASA, grants where they are the lead, grants where they're developing cutting-edge technology, grants that are funding graduate students and new facilities that are really fantastic and impressive. He's really moved it up to another level.
See, I fight for Delaware State because I love, they beat me. I got beat up one time for fighting for Delaware State, which was ridiculous because anytime University of Delaware is playing anyone but Delaware State, I'm rooting for University of Delaware, except when they're playing Delaware State. Let me ask you, let me change the subject. You were doing something with African or something, or what were you doing there?
I'm the chair of the Africa Subcommittee on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So of the members of the Foreign Relations Committee, I'm responsible for our relations with the 54 countries of the continent of Africa. I chair the confirmation hearings for all the U.S. ambassadors, and I've made now a series of trips with different members, Republican and Democrat, to look at the money that we're spending, to look at the economic opportunity that's over there, and to look at some of the security challenges. So, for example, I went to Mali. Some folks have followed closely what's happened in Mali. After Gaddafi fell in Libya, thousands of tons of weapons and some Islamic extremists went across the Sahara Desert and took over all of northern Mali. This is where Timbuktu and Gao and Kidal are. And they started really digging in and setting up a new jihadist base from which to attack Western Europe and the United States. They started imposing a fairly extreme version of Sharia law. And after 6 months, most of the countries in the region started asking for help from the West.
Some of your early travels, right? When you did some work over there, it helped you out in a sense, right? Do you think?
I was an undergraduate at the University of Nairobi for a semester. I wrote a book on divestment my first year out of college. And
did you?
And then I worked in South Africa for the Council of Churches for Desmond Tutu back in 1987, and I've had a chance to go back to South Africa.
Is that book, you still have that book?
It's not a particularly exciting book. It's now more history because it's about the divestment movement that was sort of America's contribution to the liberation movement in South Africa. But what was amazing to me about meeting up with folks in leadership in South Africa today, they were all, of course, in the ANC. They were all folks who were part of the liberation movement. The South African ambassador, in part through my building some relationship with him, came to Wilmington just a couple of weeks ago for this terrific Mid-Atlantic Food and Wine Festival where they promoted South African foods and wines and products. And my hope is that we're going to succeed in growing the amount of South African products that are imported through the Port of Wilmington and grow jobs. Because frankly, at the end of the day, it's great for me to go and be involved in justice and security and economic development in Africa, but it's got to connect to creating jobs here in Delaware.
You know, it's interesting, and because, you know, you're on Crossfire, you know, I'm going to always...
Of course.
You just said something about the port and with South Africa. Did you follow the Kinder Morgan stuff? And do you have an opinion on that? Do you think we should have privatized it? Or do you agree with the unions basically saying, like, once these private firms come in, the Halliburtons or whatever, we're done?
I think it's important for everybody to understand what the terms were and what was being negotiated. Maybe those negotiations weren't as open as they could have been. I think I've heard from the governor that there was a commitment to keeping the existing relationships, the Delaware contractors who've been operating that port for many, many years and have done a good job, and keeping the relationships with the longshoremen. I understand why there was some uncertainty about it, but frankly, I don't see that the General Assembly is going to invest the tens of millions of dollars we need to get out on the river and to strengthen the port and to continue deepening both the river and the port. The piece of this that I'm involved in as a senator is fighting for federal money for the Army Corps of Engineers to deepen the Delaware River, because the Panama Canal is widening, and there's going to be much more opportunity for container ports on the East Coast. And if Wilmington, Delaware is set up and structured to take advantage of this, we can grow significantly. But that's going to take some investment. Whether the state does it or a company like Kinder Morgan does it, at the end of the day, someone's got to come up with tens of millions of dollars to modernize and expand the port. This port, and I didn't really know this, I didn't appreciate this until I became a senator, it is the #1 banana landing port in the world, and it is one of the best fruit and produce landing ports in the whole country.
Is that from, we get a lot of stuff from Chile?
From Chile, a lot of Chilean table grapes, Moroccan clementines, and increasingly bananas from all throughout the hemisphere. Those are great jobs. We've invested over many years, the state of Delaware has, in a world-class port, and I just think we ought to be continuing to invest in it so we can get more jobs, higher quality jobs, and union jobs. I support that remaining a union port, and I fought hard for the money to dredge and deepen the Delaware River so that all the ports along the Delaware River, I've done this in partnership with the Pennsylvania senators, have the opportunity to compete in what is a growing global commercial world where we could bring containers up the Delaware River and really significantly grow what we're getting into the Port of Wilmington.
Okay, thank you. If you just joined in, I'm interviewing U.S. Senator Chris Coons. We're going to talk about a number of different issues. If you want to join in, we'll put the phone lines up. Senator, also, you know, it's funny. I was on a train going to a meeting, and I heard they were talking about the Keystone Pipeline. What exactly is that? And I know I read somewhere that you voted for. You know,
two things about that. First, the Keystone Pipeline is something that's been made into a really big deal. It's sort of a symbolic fight for those who want to see us be energy independent and do more distribution and refining of product in the United States from Canada or from Mexico on one side, and those who say we should not be facilitating the development of tar sands in central Canada. The Keystone Pipeline is something that has to be reviewed and approved by the administration. The Congress does not have a role directly in reviewing and approving the Keystone Pipeline. The
president was against it, right?
The president, I can't tell you where the president is today on this. He has made decisions, the Department of State has made decisions in the past that stopped it and slowed it down. It's been reviewed for several years now. And the Department of State has a role because it crosses international boundaries. It starts in Canada and it moves through most of the Midwest all the way to the Gulf if it were to be built. One of the things that I think is easy to forget is that we have literally thousands of miles of oil pipelines all over this country, up and down the East Coast, connecting the Gulf Coast where we have a big concentration of refineries with the West and with the North, and of course the main one that goes up and down Alaska that takes the North Shore oil and delivers it to the terminal. So we've got a lot of pipelines in this country. Let me be clear about what I did and didn't vote for. We just passed a budget. I'm on the Energy Committee, and I have voted against the Keystone Pipeline when it's come up in previous circumstances. I feel like the administration is the appropriate place to review it and to consider it, and I voted against our intervening, either for or against. I say there is a process, there is a set of rules, there's a set of evaluation criteria. The administration ought to be looking at it. In the budget, part of why we didn't adopt a budget resolution the last 2 years was it is the only resolution where there's an unlimited amount of amendments. Unlimited. We just keep taking up and voting on amendments until everybody gets so tired they all go home. When we actually took up the budget resolution, this was 2 weeks ago now, we started at 11 a.m. and we voted all the way until 4:30 a.m., basically a day and a half later. We voted on over 100 amendments, both some by unanimous consent, some by voice vote, and some by roll call vote.
But in the simplest form,
yes,
you voted for it.
I voted for an amendment to the budget that said, if the administration approves it, then we should recognize there will be increased revenue to the Treasury of the United States. That was neither an approval nor a denial. It was essentially recognizing the administration should be allowed to go ahead and review it.
The reason why I asked
It's been publicized as voting in favor of it.
I got you.
That's not what it was.
Well, it's hard to explain. That's why
It's
you got to
very
come
hard
on.
to
That's why.
explain.
And aren't you impressed that I'm even on this?
I'm very impressed you're on top of those details.
I stay on top of stuff. You know, but also to this point, right? And most people watching probably have no idea what we're talking about. It's going to create a lot of jobs and a lot of money, but then you got the environmental concerns.
Yes.
So you want to catch 22 as a senator.
That's right. Legitimate concerns
because you're going through some
change.
of the urban areas.
That's right. A lot of that central Canadian tar sands oil is actually being shipped by railroad to the to the PBF refinery in Delaware City and being refined there today. So big picture, one of the things we need to look at is there any way to prevent this oil from being extracted and refined, whether it's by pipeline through Vancouver to China or to India, by railroad to the Mid-Atlantic, or by pipeline to the Gulf Coast. I think there are some legitimate questions about whether this oil is going to be prevented by having the pipeline denied, or whether it'll find some other way to the market. So I think we ought to let the process play out and see what the administration does. To make it even sharper, our friends in organized labor, particularly the building trades, they strongly support the Keystone Pipeline. Okay. Folks in the environmental community, very strongly against it.
That's weird, because they're usually on the same side on most issues.
Jobs, jobs, jobs. Particularly if you could require American steel and American workers, and that the oil moving through it be used within the United States. That tends to move folks in organized labor to say we ought to be doing this. Okay. But I've heard very strongly from the environmental community, from the Sierra Club, the League of Conservation Voters, they are strongly against this because of their concerns about global warming.
Thank you for that clarification. Also, of course, you know, you're in Washington, you had to deal with a controversial issue here with this Stoltz project right here at Barley Mills. How did you get in that? I mean, it looks like Pam Scott, did she write some legislation for you?
No. And that, I don't know, have you read through all these different?
I've read, I mean, you know, Nancy sent me some stuff and I've read, you know, because she has a blog and, you know, I've read some of the stuff. And I was like, this guy's a bright guy. Why would he need somebody to write legislation for him?
She didn't write legislation for me. And if you look at the News Journal article, I think they largely get this piece right. Okay. The current county executive went and searched through all the emails from the entire time that I was county executive. I was county executive for 6 years. And there were dozens and dozens of community meetings, of contentious projects, of decisions about everything from, you know, pay raises or pay rates, tax raises, sewers, land use, lots of different decisions. The only thing they found, and this was discussed in the paper, was a proposal from Pam Scott for a piece of legislation which was rejected out of hand. Greg Wilson, who was my attorney at the time, county attorney at the time, rejected it and said, this is not the sort of thing that we should approve. And I did not approve a piece of legislation that was discussed in that article. The thing they did find was that there was a press release, a public statement saying, here's what the community, the Greenville, the folks who were advocating for the Greenville community, here's the position they took, here's the position Stoltz taking, and here's my public statement on it. And that went back and forth between my office and Pam Scott, where she was making some revisions to it. But that's a public statement. That's a press release. That is not a piece of legislation.
You know, when you look back at this in retrospect, you know, and it looks like, you know, the traffic studies and all this kind of stuff. Would you do something different? Or
here's what I did that I feel very comfortable with today.
Okay.
Early on in the process, when Stoltz bought this whole huge parcel and several other parcels across Newcastle County, Mr. Stoltz asked and asked and asked for a meeting in my office. Took him a couple weeks to get one, but I finally sat down with him and he said, here's a way that you could end run the whole public process. Wow. And by executive action.
Actually said that?
By executive action, allow me to get all of this, or most of this, approved without years of contentious public debate. I said no, I said, I don't think that's appropriate. These are separate parcels. They are not connected. They have to go through a public land use review process. Here we are 5 years later. It's still not approved. They still do not have final recorded plans. And what I thought was important from the very beginning was that these potentially controversial plans go through county council, go through the land use review and approval process, go through the variance approval process, and that's what's happened. It's resulted in years of fighting. It's been expensive and complicated and difficult for the community and for the developer.
Do you think it's
that's appropriate?
But do you think it's a good project?
You know, ultimately, the size of the project that they were trying to build was way beyond what I think is appropriate for the parcel.
Okay.
But people who buy pieces of property have a legal right to do something with it, to develop it, according to what its land use code permits.
Right.
And in this particular case, this is one of the most difficult cases. The intersection between the state rules for what roads have to be built where and the county rules for how much density of land is going to be allowed have to be tightly defined so that it's clear what the requirements are. And in this particular case, we'd had changes in both the zoning standards and the traffic standards that really weren't clear. So they've spent years fighting over it with the community, litigating about it. Remember, I've been gone from being county executive for more than 3 years now.
I got you.
Most of the work on this, most of the details on this happened after I left.
Okay, got you. If you're just joining in, ladies and gentlemen, I'm enjoying this conversation as always. I think that ask tough questions, good questions, and folks don't come, you know, they don't come here with any paper. I don't give you anything up front that's good about. Let me, you got an election coming up, right? In 2014. I
was elected in a special election to the last 4 years of the term that Joe Biden, Vice President Biden, was originally elected to. Okay. So I'm up in 2014.
Wow. Let me ask you, do you foresee a primary?
I don't.
Can I be very honest?
But you can't, you never know.
This is what I heard. I heard that our Attorney General has been looking at that seat to run against you, primary, which I don't believe will happen, but you know you've heard the rumors. I mean, we could be honest here. Or run for governor. I wish I had those kind of options. You know,
those are good options to have.
I could. Let me see. Do I want to be United States Senator or do I want to be governor? Does that? Have you guys had a conversation, or do that irk you, or are you just like running for the seat? I'm not just saying him in general. It could be 1,000 other people. Yep. But I just heard that name.
As with every previous election I've run, and you know I've run several times. Right. I welcome all and any comers. I welcome folks who want to run against me in the general, in the primary. I'm running for re-election. I'm optimistic about my chances. I'm going to work very hard, and I'm looking forward to being re-elected.
You hit the ground running pretty well.
Look, it's a very tough job. There are lots of challenges facing our country, our budget, the environment, job creation, the international situation. So I've enjoyed it. I appreciate the opportunity to represent Delaware, and I look forward to having a chance to do it further.
You got an award from the National PTA, right?
Yeah.
Right? Parent associations. You've been doing a lot of stuff in education. Want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Actually, it's how we first got to work together, and with Maurice Pritchett, who was a terrific principal at Bancroft, someone who really knew the kids, someone who was really connected to the community. So I'll agree with the previous statement you made that Maurice, Mr. Pritchett, is somebody who brings something special to connecting with kids. I've been a co-sponsor of a number of pieces of legislation in the Congress to try and strengthen parents and their role in education, and to try and take my experience with the I Have a Dream Foundation and turn it into a model national program. There are chapters all over the country.
Okay.
There is not one here. The kids who I worked with are now in their 30s.
Wow.
Yeah, time does pass. But what I'm trying to do in partnership with the Department of Education, the guy who's the U.S. Secretary of Education, Arnie Duncan, actually worked with an I Have a Dream program class in Chicago. That was his very first job in education. And we've got a demonstration program to try and look at what's the impact on kids of knowing when they're in elementary school that they have a college savings account that has some amount of money in it, that they and their family and their community and their mentors or tutors or church or fraternity, sorority, or community group that is helping them save for higher education.
Okay.
Some studies show that you are 4 times more likely to go to college if there is something in your name, some savings account in your name for college, that you begin to talk about the possibility of college. And in Delaware, at Delaware State, we've got these remarkable Inspire scholarships, for example.
Well, absolutely.
Saturday morning was the kickoff of the Inspire Day of Service, when hundreds of Del State students go and do service across the state. I think if Delaware students knew that the federal Pell Grant, the state Seed Grant, and the state Inspire Grant were available to them, they would make different choices in middle school and early on in high school. If you don't know this money is available for higher education until you get to 10th or 11th grade, you may have already made choices in terms of studies, behavior, curriculum that make it harder for you to finish high school and get on to higher education. So this is of real interest to me. I have something called the American Dream Accounts that Marco Rubio of Florida, Republican, you know, he and I don't have a lot in common in some of our views, but we've now done 4 pieces of legislation
together. I've seen you guys on MSNBC.
We've worked well together. Yeah. You know, I've been pleasantly surprised that, you know, if you invest the time and effort, if you get to know people individually, you get to know their families, you can legislate together. It's not impossible.
Okay, put up the phone number.
How we first got to work together, and with Maurice Pritchett, who was a terrific principal at Bancroft, someone who really knew the kids, someone who was really connected to the community. So I'll agree with the previous statement you made that Maurice, Mr. Pritchett, is somebody who brings something special to connecting with kids. I've been a co-sponsor of a number of pieces of legislation in the Congress to try and strengthen parents and their role in education, and to try and take my experience with the I Have a Dream Foundation and turn it into a model national program. There are chapters all over the country.
Okay.
There is not one here. The kids who I worked with are now in their 30s.
Wow.
Yeah, time does pass. But what I'm trying to do in partnership with the Department of Education, the guy who's the U.S. Secretary of Education, Arnie Duncan, actually worked with an I Have a Dream program